You've had a bad day, stuck in traffic, spilled coffee, late for work. Trust me, that's nothing. Because once upon a time, punishment wasn't about justice. It was about theater. It was about breaking body and spirit in ways so cruel, you'll thank the universe you weren't born a few centuries earlier. From rats chewing through your flesh to death by 1,000 cuts, here are history's worst torture methods. And buckle up, because this ride makes horror movies look like bedtime stories. 10. The Rat Dungeon. Our story begins in medieval London, under the Tower of London, a place that already had a reputation for misery. But deep in its bowels was a chamber known simply as the Rat Dungeon. The cell sat just below the Thames waterline. When the tide rose, it flushed out nests of rats straight into the dungeon. Shackled prisoners, trapped in pitch darkness, could hear claws scratching across stone, squeaks echoing in the blackness, and then feel the first bite. Imagine lying in the total darkness, unable to move, knowing you're not alone. At first, it's just nibbles at your clothes, then sharp teeth pierce skin. The squeaking multiplies. You scream, but no one hears you over the tide. Hours become days. Exhaustion, blood loss, infection, and insanity finish you before the rats do. For guards, it was efficient. For rulers, it was psychological terror. And for the condemned, it was the slow realization that you were nothing more than food. If rats make your skin crawl, just wait. Persia had a punishment where insects ate you alive. 9. Scaphism, the boats. If the rat dungeon was hell in darkness, scaphism was death in daylight. Ancient Persia perfected this nightmare, known as the boats. The victim was wedged between two hollowed-out logs, head, arms, and legs sticking out. Then came the feast, milk and honey forced down their throat until their stomach bloated, and then smeared across their exposed skin. Now, picture it, lying helpless on a swampy pond, body sticky sweet, your own waste pooling beneath you. At first, it's just flies landing, then mosquitoes drilling. Soon maggots hatch inside your sores, worms burrow into open wounds, and every inch of you writhes with biting, crawling, chewing life. Guards kept you alive, spoon-feeding more milk and honey. One account describes a soldier lasting 17 days before he finally died. 17 days. That's not execution. That's becoming a buffet. And if slow torture by bugs sounds unbearable, Europe cranked up the pain with a device designed to rip you apart, piece by piece. 8. The rack. The rack wasn't just a machine. It was the symbol of medieval interrogation, the lie detector of the Middle Ages, except the only answer was whatever the torturer wanted. The victim was laid flat on a wooden frame, ankles chained to one roller, wrists to another. With each crank, ropes pulled tighter, joints strained, muscles tore, and bones popped out of sockets. Imagine every nerve in your body screaming at once, knowing that the crank could still turn further. The goal wasn't death, it was submission. People confessed to witchcraft, treason, heresy, anything to make it stop. The tragedy? Torturers knew the confessions were false, but it didn't matter. The spectacle was the point. Anne Askew, a 25-year-old Protestant reformer, was stretched until her body dislocated in every joint. She was carried to her execution chair, unable to walk, and then burned alive. The rack didn't just kill her body, it erased her dignity first. But if the rack stretched you apart, Vlad the Impaler went straight for turning humans into grotesque lawn ornaments. 7. Impalement. Vlad III of Wallachia, better known as Vlad the Impaler, wasn't just brutal. He was theatrical. His favorite method? Impalement. The condemned was forced onto a sharpened wooden stake, often inserted through the anus or abdomen and carefully angled to avoid immediate death. The stake was sometimes greased to prolong the agony. Slowly, gravity did the rest. The victim's body slid downward, organs shifting, until the stake finally pierced out of the chest, neck, or even mouth. Victims could writhe for hours, sometimes days. Vlad impaled thousands at once, creating forests of the impaled outside his capital to terrify enemies. And it worked. One invading Ottoman army turned back after seeing the spectacle of 20,000 rotting bodies swaying on stakes. It wasn't just punishment, it was psychological warfare. Imagine being a soldier, ready to fight, and then walking into a valley of corpses on poles, their faces frozen in eternal screams. From human forests to metallic monsters, the Greeks built a machine that literally turned death into sound. 6. The Brazen Bull. Ancient Sicily's tyrant Phalaris wanted something new, something that didn't just kill, but entertained. Enter the Brazen Bull. It looked like a bronze statue of a bull, hollow inside, with a hatch on the side. A prisoner was locked inside. A fire was lit beneath. Slowly the body roasted alive. But here's the genius, or the horror. Sound tubes were designed so the victim's screams echoed out of the bull's nostrils, transformed into the roaring of a beast. Crowds watched. Smoke curled from the bull's mouth like incense. A symphony of human agony, disguised as an animal's cry. The first victim, the inventor himself. Legend says Phalaris didn't appreciate being shown such cruelty, so he tested it on the man who built it. Later, the tyrant himself was cooked in the very bull he'd commissioned. Poetic justice, but still, thousands burned before the bull was retired, from bulls on fire to elephants on command. In Asia, rulers had an executioner with tusks. 5. Execution by elephant. For centuries in India and Southeast Asia, elephants weren't just royal symbols. They were weapons of law. Trained elephants could kill in 2 ways, quickly by crushing a skull instantly, or slowly, by trampling one limb at a time, pausing between blows. Some rulers even ordered elephants to toss victims into the air, or pin them before delivering the final stomp. Crowds gathered for these performances. It wasn't just death, it was political theater. Watching an emperor command a beast of such size reinforced absolute power. If he could control an elephant, he could certainly control you. Some records describe criminals being tied down while elephants pressed on them slowly, prolonging the terror. It wasn't execution, it was domination, played out in public for everyone to fear. But if elephants crushed you fast, France invented a punishment that erased you slowly, with silence and darkness. 4. The oubliette dungeon. Oubliette, from the French word oublier, meaning to forget. And that's exactly what happened to anyone thrown into one. These were narrow vertical shafts hidden inside castles. Prisoners were dropped down with no ladder, no exit. The space was too small to lie down, too cramped to sit. No light, no food, no water. Some oubliettes doubled as mass graves, filled with the bones of past victims. Imagine being sealed inside with rotting corpses. Your only company the stench of death and the scratching of rats. In Ireland's Leap Castle, workers found an oubliette stuffed with so many skeletons that it took cartloads to remove them. Worse, some weren't underground at all. They were built at ground level, so prisoners could hear laughter, music, and life continuing just outside while they starved in forgotten silence. Death here wasn't just physical, it was erasure. If silence kills you, England found a way to make death loud, sizzling, and unforgettable. 3. Boiling alive. Boiling alive. The phrase alone makes you cringe. But in Tudor England, it was the law. Henry VIII decreed that poisoners should be boiled in water, oil, or lead. Victims were lowered into giant cauldrons, sometimes feet first, so the agony stretched on. Sometimes they were yanked back out mid-scream, only to be plunged in again. The science of the pain is horrifying. Extremities rich in nerve endings cooked first. Blisters erupted, flesh peeled, deeper tissues roasted. The screams were said to be so awful that hardened executioners fainted. And if that wasn't cruel enough, some executions began with cold liquid, slowly heated. The body tried to adjust until it couldn't. It wasn't a quick death. It was a demonstration of royal wrath, and yet, boiling pales next to a Viking method that turned your lungs into wings. 2. The Blood Eagle. Norse sagas describe a ritual so brutal, it still sparks debate. The Blood Eagle. The victim's back was sliced open, ribs severed from the spine and spread outward like wings. The lungs were then pulled through the gaps, flapping grotesquely in the cold air. Was it real? Scholars argue it may have been propaganda, exaggerated to strike fear into enemies. But whether legend or reality, the imagery alone haunted generations. If it did happen, death wouldn't be instant. Victims would gasp, lungs exposed, until suffocation finally ended it. In Viking culture, it was as much theater as execution, a punishment that terrified enemies and glorified the gods. Even if it was myth, the fact it was told shows just how much the idea of suffering as spectacle shaped history. And finally, the worst of them all. A punishment so methodical, so drawn out, it earned a chilling name. One, lingqi, death by 1,000 cuts. Used in China for centuries, lingqi wasn't about execution. It was about breaking body and soul. The condemned was tied upright. Then came the cuts, small slices, one after another. At first, shallow wounds on arms and legs, then deeper ones, removing chunks of flesh. Hundreds of cuts delivered slowly, keeping the victim alive as long as possible. Executioners sometimes gave victims opium to extend consciousness, dragging the suffering out for hours. Crowds gathered to watch as flesh peeled away, until the final slash to the throat brought release. But lingqi wasn't just physical torment. In Confucian belief, mutilation of the body meant dishonor even in death. No peace, no proper afterlife. It wasn't only about dying painfully. It was about dying with eternal shame. Some condemned begged for the final blow. Others fainted only to be revived so the torment could continue. The phrase, death by 1,000 cuts, wasn't poetic exaggeration. It was reality. So, which of these made you squirm? Rats chewing through flesh? A bull that sang with screams? Or lingqi's endless nightmare? Drop your answer below. And if you're brave enough to keep going down history's darkest rabbit holes, subscribe, because this was only round one of humanity's worst ideas.